Check one, two. Okay, there you go. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, if I can get everybody to turn their cell phones off. Put them on mute. Okay, we don't actually have a quorum, but being respectful of the presenters and our time constraints and wanting to let as many people talk as possible, then we are going to go ahead and start. There are lots of meetings going on, other committee meetings, and so I'm sure other members will be joining us and members will be going in and out. We're not going to stop for a lunch break. Members, if you're listening, if you need to excuse yourself, go to the restroom and come back, just, quietly go. I guess it would be the same for people in the audience. Okay, here's how we're going to do this. Representative Oliver and Representative Jones are going to go through the bill. We are working off a substitute. Representative Oliver was nice enough to get 50 copies of the substitute printed. We will hand them out at the end so that you're not trying to go, if you have a copy of the original, you're not rustling papers and trying to find where your part will be. We have asked that people give us in writing with numbers, page numbers, and where their suggestions for changes or additions would go. We will meet, Representative Oliver and Representative Jones and myself, and we will be responsible for taking the numbers you have given us and matching where they would go to see whether we add them, don't add them, use some of them or whatever with the bill. So don't worry that what you gave us would have numbers for the original bill. We will get them in the right place to look at them, the three of us. So, and we will pass out the new sub. It just came out hot off the press, barely in time to make it to the meeting. So now, members, you do have the original and a sub. So we are going to be working, and they're going to be presenting off of 11C 338939. LC 338939. Members, do not get it mixed up with the original. What?
Look again.
It's backwards. See, I told you my members would get confused, starting with me. Okay, so we are working off LC 339025S. Okay, we marked it. They are marked at the top. Okay. Except on mine. Mine had a circle around it, not the numbers. Okay. Okay. Any questions on how we're going to do it? I am not going to have members ask you questions after you present the bill. We will be meeting next week. Whether we'll be voting on it next week, I'm not sure. It depends on how we move along. But I will ask for y'all to come back next week, and we will go through whatever sub that is available at that time. And members then will focus on the questions. If something hits you as a member that you're just dying to know, then I hope you will write that down and that you will speak to Representative Oliver or Representative Jones on your own as soon as possible between the meetings. So write down what your question is and ask it when you can talk to them privately. Okay, and with that, I will turn the floor. Oh, the sign-up sheets. Well, right, I'll remind people there are sign-up sheets in the back. If you have not signed up, please do. Helen, make sure you leave that at least there's some shiny blanks left back there in the back. You can bring me the ones that are filled out or almost filled out, but thanks, Terry. All right, but there are sign-up sheets. With as many people as we have want to talk, there's probably not going to be time for long dissertations when you do get to speak. So people are going to have to make their points in a succinct manner. Okay. Representative Oliver and Representative Jones, you have the floor.
Chairman Cooper, thank you so much. We sure do appreciate your time and the committee's time. On behalf of Chairman Oliver and I, we think we're going to be able to head through this very simple, straightforward bill in just a few minutes. And that might be the biggest hyperbolic statement we've heard all session. Let me go ahead and walk the committee through in terms of how we're going to go ahead and do this. We hope that this is the most efficient way. I'm just going to do a couple opening statements. I am then going to go ahead and hit primarily the parity piece and then also the medical loss ratio piece. Chairman Oliver will then pick up from there. She's going to give us a more detailed timeline in terms of, I'm just going to call it the origination of how this all came to be, basically starting with the appointment of the committee, the commission, and then all the way through. And then Chairman Oliver will take the rest of the bill for you. We hope that that's going to provide you with a lot of information, a lot of things to chew on. And I'd like to reiterate Chairman Cooper's comments. If you have anything to give us, if you could please write that down, margin note, annotate, but we really are looking for a line number. And we're also looking for specific changes, not just broad. And I would say that out to the general public too. That is something that will help Chairman Oliver and I. We are being inundated in a good way. And that's one of the things I want to start my opening comments with. Chairman Oliver and I maintain an open mind on this bill. We want and we welcome constructive criticism, and we also welcome solutions to what you think are areas where we may have missed. This is an opportunity for Georgia to pick up from number 49 or number 50, depending on where you want to put us in this ranking, which unfortunately is at the bottom, and hopefully leap us into the top 5. We both believe that perfect should not be the enemy of the good, but at the same time, we probably have one shot right now to get this ball into the end zone. And hearkening back to the national champions, we don't want a field goal, we want a touchdown. And it's really important for us to be able to do that. So in order to do that, we're going to go ahead and get going now. So let me give you just a brief introduction on my comments. My comments are derived. Oh, sorry.
Here again, we have the sub. For people in the audience, please, would y'all make sure that you read out the line number and the page number or the line number where it's going to be in the sub. And y'all write it down so that you can find it when you get the sub when you leave. So that's to the people in the audience. And I'm asking y'all, you maybe say it twice, the number where it's going to be so they can easily find it. Sorry.
Sure. Absolutely. One of the things I want to assure the folks who are listening to this, this sub is minor. This was kind of nitpick areas that we just felt we could just substitute some language. Very, very, very minor. Chairman Oliver and I do not expect, I'll say, the major revisions until the next sub. And to be clear, we do expect another sub, but we expect that one to be, in a sense, using the medical terms of a true organ transplant. This was not an organ transplant in terms of this sub. Finally, the last comment I want to make, we're going to probably hear a lot of testimony, both from people who have experienced Georgia's system. And I almost feel as if, well, my family and I have experienced this personally. Many of you know the oldest of my 4 children, Justin. He has had severe mental illness or diagnosed with severe mental illness and substance abuse issues for 6 years, 7 years. You hear a little bit more about that in testimony from my wife today. But the speaker was very clear. He said, passion isn't what's going to make us go from 50 to number 1. It's going to be a lot of hard work. And I can say this, Chairman Oliver and I, we're committed to that hard work. We believe that you're committed to that hard work. We believe that the good actors who are going to be giving testimony are committed to that hard work. And we're looking forward to making a bill that works, not just for Justin Jones, my oldest son, but for every Georgian who truly is in need of, and frankly needs to know how to tackle the challenges of mental illness. One of the things you will see in the bill, and Chairman Oliver will cover it, is effectively a navigation path. For those of you who've ever had a family member or a close friend who you think is having either a psychotic episode, a mental illness episode, or possibly some type of substance abuse issue, I will assure you, even though as legislators, we have the backbone, we still couldn't figure out how to navigate the system. So I can assure you, our 10.7 million Georgian, the citizens that we're responsible for, don't know how to navigate the system. And we have the cheat code, guys. We have the texts. We have the mobile phones. and we can't navigate it. So if we can't navigate it, I think we can assume the folks that we're responsible to represent, they probably can't navigate it either. But Chairman Oliver will hit that more in color. So let's go ahead and dive into the bill, if that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and start with section 1-2. That's lines 52 through 178. The mode that we're in right now is, instead of going line by line, it's a 75-page bill. We're going to give you a summary. Hopefully that summary gives the high points. Clearly, if not, let me know, and we're happy to give you and dive in. We've annotated, but at the same time, we hope the summary helps. So in section 1.1-2, first, this is mental health parity provisions for private insurers. A simple way to talk about parity is this: if you're covering physical, you got to cover mental equally, just like the word means, parity. And like I always like to say, and I've said it before for those of you who've heard it, a broken arm is set it, cast it, come back in 8 weeks, is probably calcified, but there's a very good chance the brain didn't heal in 8 weeks. So we need to treat each of those with its own individual type treatment to ensure that we are able to get the outcome we want, which is, quote, the individual being able to move forward. So first, it requires insurers, and these are non-ERISAs, to provide mental health coverage in accordance with the Federal Mental Health Parity Act, Parity and Addiction Equity Act. That was in 2008. Requires mental health coverage for adults, infants, children, and adolescents. Requires private insurers to submit an annual report to the insurance commissioner regarding comparative analysis, processes, and strategies used to apply such benefits as delineated in the federal act. Requires the insurance commissioner to conduct an annual data call of all private insurers to monitor compliance with mental health parity compliance and to report these results. And I will also add significant transparency provisions inside of the bill. Requires the insurance commissioner to provide mental health parity compliance review and healthcare entities in their 5-year review. Requires the insurance commissioner to provide consumer complaint process, create a repository for tracking complaints, and submit annual report to the Georgia Data Analytics Center and the Georgia General Assembly regarding the complaint process and complaint resolution. I will tell you right now, if that was alive and well, it would probably be the most called hotline in Georgia, unfortunately, possibly more so than DOL. Subject to appropriations, provide for mental health parity officer appointed by the insurance commissioner. And then finally, it defines key terms, including generally accepted standards of mental health or substance use disorder care, medically necessary, mental health or substance use disorder, and non-quantitative treatment limitation, or NQTL. Well, that was a lot to bring down, and we just started. We're not a tenth of the way through the bill. Section 1-3, which is the Patient's Right to Independent Review Act. Let me go ahead and turn. That's lines 179 to 225. It moves the independent review panels from DCH to DOI, basically insurance. Redefines medical necessity to be consistent throughout and adds definitions for generally accepted standards of mental health and substance use disorder care and mental health of substance use disorder. Effectively, we need to standardize all of these and at the same time make a few modifications. And Chairman Oliver will get into the word imminent, and that's going to be a very important word as we go through this bill. Section 1-4, which is mental health parity provisions for public insurers. So that's, for instance, Medicaid, the state health benefit plan, et cetera. That's lines 226 to 343. Requires Medicaid, Peach Care, and the state health benefits plan provide mental health coverage in accordance with the Federal Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act. I want to stress requires, not optional. Requires mental health care coverage for adults, infants, children, and adolescents. Requires Medicaid, Peach Care, and the state health benefit plan provider to submit an annual report to the DCH regarding comparative analysis and processes and strategies used to apply such benefits as delineated in the federal act. Requires a DCH commissioner to perform an annual market conduct examinations of private insurers to determine compliance with the mental health parity compliance and to publish status report on the website. Again, more transparency. About halfway through that section. Requires a DCH commissioner to establish consumer complaint processes, create a repository for tracking complaints, and submit annual report to the General Assembly regarding the complaint process and complaint resolution. For those of you in the private sector, I'd love to see us get to a net promoter score. So if you've been in the private sector, NPS, if you haven't been in the private sector, I would suggest Googling it, but it's a great way to determine, are we doing a good job with, quote, our customers? And in this case, those are our constituents. Defines key terms, just like we did in the last section, generally accepted standards of mental health and substance abuse disorder care, medically necessary mental health or substance disorder, and again, not NQTL. This section is the state plan's counterpart to section.
To slow down just a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And you might not want to use initials for things. The committee might not know what was the last one that you.
Oh, it was NQTL. I had said it 2 times, so I wasn't sure if they wanted me to go again, but I will.
Well, you need to explain what it is.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to get to the MLR and we'll explain the NQTL.
Well, we can explain the MLR too. I wasn't speaking of just one. You can slow down just a little and you can give us the first time you use initials. Tell us what they are.
Will do. Okay. Medical loss ratio, MLR, line 344. You should have in front of you a PowerPoint. I hope you do. It looks like this. I'm going to go ahead and pause just for a moment so you have that. The reason that's been given to you is because when you start talking math, numbers, and examples, our feeling was that a visual would be more powerful than just going through it. The medical loss ratio is basically, it requires the CMOs for the Medicaid and Page Care to comply with a minimum 85% medical loss ratio or MLR, or a higher minimum percentage by contract. So if we could very quickly, if you could please turn to the second page where you should have 11 billion on the left. This is basically from the Georgia taxpayers in 2019, and then you'll see on the right side the CMOs. For those of you who do not know, Georgia contracts with the CMOs to effectively provide for Medicaid. Okay, so everyone's nodding their head, so I don't need to go through that one. Okay, all right, great. So we have 9.1 billion into medical care and quality improvements, 1.65 billion for costs, overhead, and profitability at 85% MLR. And then 250 million was retained by the CMOs because that was effectively, I'll say an implied or intuited 83% is where the MLR is today. And we'll go through a little bit here in terms of what the benchmarks would be with other states. If you could turn your page, you should have on top medical loss ratio, capitation payments, and setting capitation rates. The medical loss ratio effectively talks about how much is going to be spent for care. That's really the net of it. Of every dollar that we give to a CMO, how much should be spent for care? You'll see in the bill right now, we have 85% or what is contracted. And we wanted to have that or because it was important that if someone wants to commit to something higher than that, then the department should be able to take that into account in determining whether or not they should be chosen as the CMO. The capitation payments is effectively, I'm going to say on a per head count or an FTE, a full-time equivalent type basis. And then finally setting the capitation rate. So hypothetically, and you'll see the example here momentarily, if the capitation rate is 300, then 85% would be 255 or 85 cents on every dollar is spent, quote, providing care. And I think there's some also benefits to that. And if you could skip the next page and then move to the one that says what happens when the actual MLR is less than 85%. Effectively, there would be a clawback of that money. And this is the one that says example. So if you're wondering, well, Todd, Chairman Oliver, what occurs when it falls below 85%? Well, there would be a clawback back to the state, and then that money would be moved into the general fund. Moving to the next page where you should have 3 boxes. This top one saying increased quality or quantity, excuse me. We hope that not only will we have an increase in quantity, because we're hoping to get better services from the CMOs, hopefully we'll see a decrease in cost, because if for some reason it drops below 85%, there's a recoupment of that money back into the general fund. But we're also hoping for more of a, I'll say, proactive approach, because clearly if we focus on wellness and I'll say the front end of the funnel, we hope that the back end in terms of illness is improved, and may that be with blood pressure, diabetes, etc. So those are the thoughts that we have right now. I'm going to go ahead and just stop right at the last one, which is last in the SEC. We all know the football team from Athens is not last in the SEC, but right now, other than Alabama, that does not use a CMO, we are last in the SEC. We take pride in where we're at, and I don't mean to be poking fun at this. This is not meant to be a tongue-in-cheek comment, but in order to get everyone's attention, most of the time, if you do a football metaphor, it helps. And you'll see here, I don't need to read it out to you, but you'll see going on down the left side, you'll see where the MLR is in different states that we quote, have our education systems with, for lack of a better phrase, what that variance is and what that variance amount is. So it is, I think, pretty confounding that Missouri sits at 95, Texas at 90, our northern neighbors at just about 85, and our southern neighbors at 89. So hopefully you grasp that. Okay, that's what I wanted to be able to hit on the MLR, or medical loss ratio. I'm just have a few more things that I'd like to comment on. We did make a distinction in the bill in sections 1.5 to 1.7, and that's lines 375 to 605. So it's a lot of reading, but I will tell you, it's a lot of parallel language. It's almost as if there's a ton of copy and paste. So yes, it'll make your eyes glass over, but I can assure you it's a lot of repeatability in there. And effectively, we are carving out for small group, large group, and individual policies in terms of they have an optional ability to bring in the mental health coverage. And if they do, then at that point, then it does reach the requirements that we provide to those that are required to bring it in. So in other words, what we're saying is you're going to have parity in that coverage, and you're not just going to be able to give something that's substandard. Finally, in section 1.8, which is lines 606 to 689, we talk about Medicaid appeals. Effectively, we need to have this in here so that if there is an issue, we need to be able to route through how we're going to do that. And that will be done through the Office of State Administrative Hearings. And the final approval sits with the DCH commissioner. Finally, in 1.9, lines 690 to 693, it's short, but basically it talks, what we're referring to is the DCH to submit to the Medicaid in terms of the SPA or the waivers to CMS. And basically, in the event that any of the changes in part 1 of the bill requires a state plan amendment or waiver approved by CMS to implement, DHS is required, not voluntary, it's required to submit such SPA or waiver. And then finally, on section 1-10, I don't know if anyone from the GTLA is in here, but this is basically a statutory construction provision and basically provides that nothing in part 1 of the bill will be construed to impair any existing contracts. Madam Chairwoman, that is the end of parity and MLR. I'm going to turn it over now to Chairwoman Oliver.
Madam Chairman, thank you very much for this opportunity. First of all, I want to acknowledge my other commission member appointed by Speaker Ralston, Don Hogan, and Dr. Brenda Fitzgerald, who I understand you're staffing our committee now. I hope that pays a little more than being head of CDC, but and other Behavioral Health Commission folks are here. We all owe a gratitude to Kevin Tanner and to David Ralston for forming this commission. I really wanted to be on the commission, and I kind of campaigned to get on it, and I was lucky to get on it for a couple of years ago. And I'd like to go through briefly the history of the commission, what we did in 2021 based on commission reports, and what we have done under Kevin Tanner's leadership since May 2021 to bring this bill forward. I also want to talk about all the specific conversations and meetings we've had with agencies, and including the OPB and the governor's office, and talk, as we always need to, about money. This bill is going to cost money, and for reasons that are very complex, we have money available to us. For instance, I learned this week that the settlement of the opioid case is going to bring to Georgia $600 million for drug treatment of opioid abuse. Use that as one example of these unusual times we're in. So I'm going to talk about state agency involvement. Briefly, the amendments we have already suggested and incorporated. Talk about the money that we have discussed with the governor's office and has been appropriated, and talk about some of difficult issues that we anticipate doing more work on. And for everybody who's involved and cares about this issue, for the crisis that too many Georgia families are facing, invite all of your questions and all of your involvement. This commission process, which began a couple of years ago, has been unusual. The substantive work has been done through subcommittees. Dr. Fitzgerald's chair of subcommittee. I served on the workforce subcommittee that was chaired by Gwen Skinner, and Judge Amiro is a subcommittee chair, dealt a lot with the courts. Also, this bill comes through, in addition to these subcommittee expertise, not very much legislative engagement, but a lot of substantive expertise. It comes through the recent history that we have benefited from, the experience of mental health courts, the experience of accountability courts, the experience that we're seeing organically coming up across Georgia for co-responder teams, and the failure that we have learned about and experienced in a variety of ways of outpatient treatment mandates. We have had an outpatient mandatory treatment bill for decades, and it has never worked. The accountability courts and the work we're doing through the commission is really trying to focus on that group of patients that are ER residents too often, who are not receiving treatment and who are perhaps homeless or perhaps in wealthy families. Either way, they are having trouble accessing treatment in a way that manages a crisis. The psychotic crisis that families face, the suicide rates, the deaths from substance abuse, all of this, I do not need to tell you, is on the rise in Georgia. And it is a privilege to work on a bill that's this significant and this important to these Georgia families in crisis. Let me talk about our discussions with state agencies and some of the money things first, before I go through some of the less controversial and controversial parts of the bill following medical loss ratio and parity, which are both very, very big issues in this bill that we're moving forward. We have met with the Department of Insurance, and the insurance commissioner folks suggested 3 amendments to us to our bill. We adopted all 3 of his amendments. He wanted a change of date. He wanted to clarify some language that we had incorrectly put in about competitive market surveys. And he also requested money for a parity officer. All of that has been appropriately granted to him through the governor's office and through the speaker, and the substitute includes those amendments he requested. We met with the Department of Early Learning for younger children. The biggest complaint need for assistance that comes to DECAL is for behavior issues. And they have, in the last couple of years, beefed up their operations to respond to those behavior issues. We know that early childhood intervention in so many things is important. And one of the other realities of this bill, if you speak about mental health services for early younger children in pre-K who have significant behavior issues, those children are already entitled to mental health services through the EPSDT program. I will say that, so I won't spell it. Early Periodic Screening, Diagnostic, and Testing Program. They're already entitled to that. And this bill, in relation to younger children's services, in relation to other matters like medical services for foster care children, they are entitled to. Children in schools who are have individual educational plans based on disability or incapacities, they are already federally entitled to these. I view this bill in a significant way, in talking with the agencies, is that this puts Georgia in a better position to comply with the laws that already exist for which we are obligated to carry forward and to implement for Georgia's children. We have met with the behavioral health folks in several different ways, specifically in relation to their model projects on AOT, assisted outpatient patient, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail. We have, of course, met with the Department of Community Health on some complex issues about what is required for CMS, federal Medicaid oversight folks, and what is required in terms of their data collection and in terms of who they pay, how much money for what services. And all of that, it relates to a lot of dense conversations and ongoing work. Kevin Tanner deserves a whole lot of credit, of course, for his leadership over several years, and he has been coordinating with the governor's office in very specific ways on issues of funding and in relation to the way in which leadership positions for certain duties of this bill are carried forward. Just briefly about the amendments that the substitute includes, they relate to fairly minor issues about correcting some definitions on the workforce list, to including some other participants in various discussions. And there's some issues that I'll talk about that aren't quite clear enough to us yet that require additional work. Let me begin with, I also met with the Office of State Hearings and Appeals, and Chairman Jones talked about the Medicaid appeals. You know, there are over 700,000 people that are on Medicaid now based on the emergency orders of public health orders. These Medicaid services cannot be terminated. So we have expanded Medicaid based on the emergency orders, but the appeal process has basically stopped to whether or not they may come off Medicaid in the future. So we were in thinking when the emergency public health federal orders end, that'll be an issue. And that's one of the reasons the OSHA crowd was very helpful in us straightening out that. Let me begin with the workforce system on page 29 of the sub. And that really shows that we understand that our biggest issue, not only for behavioral health, not only for our psychiatric hospitals, but as we know from every single agency that we heard from in the budget, workforce is the issue. We are creating cancelable loan program for a variety of mental health substance abuse professionals. That's line 697 to 824. It's really important, and this is one of the two of our amendments, to include every medical health professional out there who may be eligible for this cancelable loan program. We have analyzed the cost of that. It will be probably between $8 and $10 million. And that is a necessary expense that we have to put forward in order to assist the provision of professionals out, particularly in rural Georgia, but not only rural Georgia. It's all across Georgia where workforce issues are very critical. Several of the advocates that have come to us, and many have come to us, many, probably over 30 to 40 pieces of paper have come to us since we had our press conference. Speaker Ralston had his press conference on January 26. We invited comments. We have received comments. This notebook here, which I'll copy for the chair, has every comment we've received, and they have been extremely helpful. And if I do nothing else today, I want to invite everybody who might be listening and cares about this issue to additionally give us comments and suggested amendments. The behavioral health workforce database has to be created. We have a professor from Georgia Tech, database and analytical person on our commission, who says we don't know who's providing services where. And the provision of a database, a real multi-system survey database, will be exactly what we can use then to develop further implementation of the cancelable loan program. Workforce, as everybody knows, is a huge issue. On page 48 of the sub, we have addressing the issue of when somebody can be determined to be of substantial risk to themselves and therefore subject to a 1013. And we are changing and removing, this is on line 1196 of the sub on page 48, we're removing the word imminent. and substituting instead a reasonable expectation that a life-endangering crisis or significant psychiatric deterioration will occur in the near future. This is a national discussion, and nationally, other states are moving away from the definition of imminent. I will tell you, as you hear testimony and as you think about this, which I've thought about it in detail, this is section 3.2 of the bill beginning on 1193 again. How does a police officer define imminent versus reasonable expectation of life endangerment? Imminent means, let me give you this example. It's 26 degrees outside and the homeless person is sleeping without cover. Is that imminent or not? Imminent harm to themselves? What if the temperature is 45 degrees? Or what if the temperature is 50? We have to move back from the word imminent. We can't ask our police officers to decide whether or not imminent means walking up and down on the bridge saying, I'm going to jump, or whether it's one step on the railing. That's what we're asking our police officers to do out there. And I think this deposition, based on the national discussion, will be of more assistance to law enforcement, which is very much in my mind. This was a weird job, not as hard as being CDC commissioner, but I was a magistrate court judge in the DeKalb jail on Friday nights for several years. It was a weird job. It was the phenomena of who came into the court, literally bleeding, frequently high on things I couldn't identify, and deciding whether or not to issue a criminal warrant based on violence. I learned some things in that experience, and I certainly learned how hard it is when someone is in crisis, which they are. What is the response of government? I think this is an important discussion to have. The second part of this important discussion is we are removing the obligation for a police officer to witness a felony in order to take somebody in. So he doesn't have to take them to jail. Right now, if he sees somebody in crisis and they're destroying the bushes in my yard, is that a felony or is it a misdemeanor? And he can't take the person to jail unless he sees an actual crime. So we're moving away from that. Again, with the participation of law enforcement, that discussion is ongoing. After we get through the involuntary commitment and definition changes that require further discussion, in part 4, beginning on page 50, we expand the opportunity for CJA, Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, to give grants. We're again thinking about this and to further serve the variety of accountability courts and mental health services. We are further expanding the grant applications to make sure that substance abuse strategies can be used. And we are appointing, page 51 on line 1267, where this is through the governor's office and leadership participation in these discussions. The Office of Health Strategy and Coordination that was previously created will assume a larger role in many of these activities we're talking about. The Behavioral Health Coordinating Council, again, is something that we have previously established. It's going to be reworked in some ways. Coordination of mental health services is very difficult, very difficult. Let me give you an example. Even though I've spent a lot of time on this, I'm still confused. A foster care child is entitled to Medicaid. That child now is served by a private CMO, AmeriGroup, but the rate about how that child's residential services or other services is set by DCH, and there's a caseworker somewhere in a county office that makes healthcare decisions for that child. That difficulty, which has resulted in a lot of hoteling of children, the term we've used, needs better coordination. And some of the work we're doing here is going to benefit that child. And I'm using that child as an example. There are many other situations of coordination is going to benefit the provision of healthcare for that child. And we exist now with some coordinating councils to try to work through that, the match program and the coordinating council. And there are various small matters in this bill that will seek to enhance that coordination and really make some definitions as to how they work together. A lot of this bill, in summary, deals with enforcement of entitlements that Georgia citizens already have that I don't believe we're in compliance with. I don't believe we're in compliance with EPSDT entitlement. I don't believe we're in compliance with medical care to foster care children. And some of the bill deals with issues of data collection. We cannot manage, we cannot evaluate unless we know what we have in front of us. And we do not right now have sufficient data to understand where our workforce issues must be most focused. It extends the year of this commission from 23 to 25. Madam Chair, I can go on, but I don't think I will. I'm more interested in hearing from people, and I'm very interested in, as specific as they can be, ideas they have for improvement. It is my hope that we will be able to move this bill forward with an additional substitute next week, if that's your pleasure. And my hope is that we will get this bill to the Senate long before crossover day. All of us, in a variety of ways, have already reached out to our friends in the Senate. Our friends in the Senate are passing similar bills in certain subject areas, and we are already making conversations with them in a hope that their ideas, particularly around co-responder programs and particularly around AOT and other matters, can be coordinated. I am here to advocate for the strongest possible bill we can pass. Do I need to repeat that, or are we clear? I am here to advocate for the strongest possible bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
But you're also advocating that we work with the lower chamber?
Well, I was over there, you know, I spent some, so I can talk in real detail about that, but I think I won't at the time.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Who's got the sign-up sheets? I think first what I'll do is, we do have members of the commission here. If y'all would like to say something, we have about 7 or 8 sheets. So let's see how many we got. We got as many people as I think. No, not as many. They're blank ones. Has everybody had a chance to sign up? I will let you speak if you would like to speak first. Introduce yourself again. And let's see, which one's 11? Number 11.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Amaro. I'm a Superior Court judge in the Flint Judicial Circuit, and I'm the Chief Justice appointee to the commission. It's a great honor and privilege to be here with you, and I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak in support of this bill. Sections 3 and 4 of this bill are targeted in large part to the population of people with severe and persistent mental illness that lack insight into their own condition. The goal of this package of reforms is to stem the flow of this population from the public health system into the criminal justice system. I am and have been an accountability court judge for more than a decade, and can say without a doubt that accountability courts work. But with respect to this population, there are limits. And that is because in the end, judges are not doctors and jails are not hospitals. This package of reforms will reduce hospitalization, reduce arrests, reduce incarceration, and provide more support for some of our most vulnerable citizens, and will better serve them than does our existing system, which criminalizes them to get them treatment frequently after long stays in local jails, during which they are being cared for in the most expensive, least effective setting, and getting worse. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Very much, Judge Mira. With any other, but we have the officer. Would you like to say, what is that, number 12?
I'm Lou Deckmore. I'm the police chief in LaGrange, Georgia. I'm a member of the commission. I'm also speaking on behalf of the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police who support this bill. The components that I'd particularly like to focus on is the one that has already been alluded to, which allows police to take individuals into custody before they commit a crime. Right now, police respond and oftentimes have to coax an individual into the ambulance or wait until there's an act of violence or property destruction or some sort of disorder before they can take him into custody. Just as an example, we deal with this so frequently. I've got about 100 officers We took a police officer position 4 or 5 years ago and made it a caseworker position so that officers refer these individuals to the caseworker, and then she tries to marry them up on an ad hoc basis with either nonprofits, other government entities, or faith-based programs. It's not systematic. It just tries to fill a gap that is not only experienced by our jurisdiction, but also is experienced throughout the state and indeed throughout the nation. The sad commentary is that by default, since the 1960s, we've criminalized mental illness. In 1960, when we were a population of 150 million, we had 600,000 inpatient treatment beds. I'm not going to debate the nature of the treatment, but the fact is that there's a recognition these people needed care. We're now a population of 335, 340 million, and we have less than 60,000 treatment beds. The three largest mental health institutions in this country, Rikers Island Jail, Cook County Jail, Los Angeles County Jail. I served on the board with the Los Angeles County Sheriffs a couple of years ago. I said, Jim, how many folks you got in your jail? 17,000. How many in your mental health unit? 6,000. And unfortunately, that's the scenario that plays out across this state. The largest mental health facilities in each county is the county jail. So allowing us to take these individuals into custody before they commit the crime and then take them to a emergency receiving center precludes the criminal justice system from getting involved in the first place. We've had since 2010, and we've had a number of them, but just for example, one individual that since 2010, we've had 176 contacts with, another 75 contacts with. Of those contacts, the one of 176, we had 31 arrests, which means 80% of the time they were able to do something short of arrest, despite the fact that we have little or few programs. But the emphasis that law enforcement has placed on dealing with the mentally ill since 2004 has been CIT, Crisis Intervention Team Training, emphasis on recognizing those affected by mental illness, and then emphasis on de-escalation. Unfortunately, once you de-escalate, if there's not an effective outpatient program, then we end up with the nature of these return calls over and over. And then the sad commentary is when they escalate and the police have to use force, and sadly, in 25% of the fatal police shootings in Georgia and across the nation are those affected by mental illness, the focus is on that incident, not the 176 that the police effectively de-escalated. One of the problems with the bill, though, has to do with once the police transfer an individual to the emergency receiving center, that they continue to be responsible for security and transportation to other centers. It's our opinion that this doesn't make sense for a couple of reasons. Number one, once the police take that individual to the treatment center, the police and the criminal justice system should no longer be involved. Two, when that individual, for whatever reason, needs to be transported, you don't need to reintroduce them to law enforcement, where the opportunity for a use of force event or destabilization of an individual that may have been stabilized at this facility now potentially will experience. And then third, 50% of the agencies in this state have 50 or less, 25% have 10 officers or less. And so the strain on the personnel, if they're required to spend 2, 4, 6, 10 hours transporting folks or staying with folks, creates a burden for that community and on law enforcement. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I want to first commend those that were responsible and participated in this commission. I also want to thank Representative Hogan for putting up with me on my phone calls for the last year, and appreciate the opportunity to visit with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I've had a bill in for about the past 3 years, and we were waiting on the commission from the, supported by all the police chiefs across the state, and it had to do with this very issue.
We have painfully dealt and not dealt well, tried to multiple times on the transport issue. If you could just send us an email of exactly what page, what line, but I believe the sheriffs have responded to me, but I would like for have you supplement that for me. Thank you.
Right.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
And then one more thing, Madam Chairman, for the
Okay.
committee, my son, Justin, my wife knows the exact, if it was the second or third time he went homeless, when we finally got counsel in terms of how we could help him, we were told, and I quote, have him commit a felony. That was the guidance we were given. And by the way, I don't blame the person who told us that. What I'm saying is that's effectively, to pick up where you're at, Chief, that's effectively how we've seen the modus operandi in the state. So just to kind of put I guess, a finer point on it.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you to all the members that served on the commission and
Thank
the
you,
work
Madam
that
Chair.
you have done. As Todd told you, mental illness probably touches everybody in this room and every family. You just may not know about it with depression or suicidal thoughts or problems that often go uncovered. The speaker put this bill in my committee because I think he knows of my passion for us to also get the best bill that we can possibly get. I lived with a schizophrenic stepmother, diagnosed, hospitalized for paranoid schizophrenia. Luckily, I had an aunt that gave me money, and I took a correspondence course in the University of Texas and managed to graduate from high school a year early so I could get away from home. But now my stepmother is dead, but I have two half sisters that have varying degrees of mental illness that, being 15 years older than they are, I now deal with on a routine basis. So it is a subject very dear and very near to my heart. And I appreciate all the work that our sponsors have done on this bill. I appreciate that it's so important to the speaker and all the work and emphasis that he has put on it, and the commitment to putting money behind the bill so that we can really make a difference. I only wish that my sisters lived here and not at Texas, as if we can get the kind of care for them as we go forward. So starting with that, we're going to start down the list. It looks like about 3 minutes for everybody, and we will time it because I want to get to everybody that wants to talk. And as a courtesy to one of our authors of the bill, I'm going to call Tracy Jones first. Tracy, just up the podium.
Sorry, I have to wear glasses these days. Good afternoon. My name is Tracy Jones, and I'm married to someone I believe you all know, Todd Jones, State Representative. As he alluded to earlier, I'm here today on behalf of our oldest son, Justin, and the rest of our family to voice our strong support for the Mental Health Parity Act. One question all parents love to hear. Get through this.
Care about you. It's okay to cry.
Sorry, I don't ever usually.
It's okay.
I had 3 boys in 4 years, so I have to stay strong.
Whoa, okay. Representative Jones. Active.
Yeah, exactly. Didn't take the class.
There we go. Help get rid of the tears.
Yes, that's good. They ask, how are your kids? Yet over the past 8 years, it has been a question I truly dread. Not because I'm ashamed or that I don't want to elaborate about my children. Of course I do. I'm a mom. But given Justin's difficult mental health diagnosis, should I start with my second, my third, and then my fourth? Or do I just start with my youngest and go backwards? Or should I just lay it all out there with my oldest and know what a bombshell it will be for those who are not familiar with severe mental illness, the lack of access to mental health care, and the toll it can take not only on the individual, but also the family? Why does that question make my heart skip a beat even now as I speak before you? Because Justin, our firstborn, has a diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder, which is a chronic mental health condition characterized primarily by symptoms of schizophrenia, such as hallucinations and delusions, and symptoms of a mood disorder, such as mania and depression. A diagnosis that was accompanied by the words, "I'm truly sorry," from the psychiatrist. After we had a really difficult hospital admission with him, and he didn't recognize me, to explain how ill he is. Over the past 8 years, the behavioral health journey of Justin and our family has included multiple inpatient and outpatient hospital stays, incarceration and probation, several periods in rehab and sober living communities, and even periods when he went missing and was homeless. I'm here today as a mother who's angry but hopeful. I'm angry that it has taken more than 8 years for Justin to get the necessary and appropriate mental health care for his diagnosis. He and our family have walked through the revolving door of access to mental health care numerous times, but until his current treatment, which was a final desperate hope, which my husband alluded to earlier, to go through the legal system via trying to get him to commit something, was our best hope. Because insurers have focused on getting him just back out that door as fast as we could, as fast as they could. In preparation for this hearing, I put together a timeline of Justin's major interactions, just to give you kind of a snapshot of our life. And I do have 3 younger children, by the way, and other parties regarding his diagnosis. As this diagnosis shows, and I know you all have a copy of this, he's been in facilities more than 30 times. Meaning that our family has averaged about 4 such major interactions every year over the last 8 years, or basically once every 3 months. Our insurers have limited Justin to relatively brief interactions with a medical care provider measured in days and weeks, focusing on Justin achieving just short-term stabilization. This focus on acute symptoms is flatly inconsistent with generally accepted professional standards that recognize the chronic nature of many mental and substance abuse disorders and emphasize the goals of long-term stabilization and relapse prevention. In addition to having to fight to get Justin his necessary and appropriate care, we also had to fight to get his diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder. After a year of his continued hallucinations and obvious psychosis, and when I say that, I mean he made up languages. He would not bathe for weeks at a time because he felt razors were coming out of the shower. That was a difficult time. And he'd pull up a chair for the people who weren't existing at our table. I explained to them that he's been sober for over a year, so this cannot be drug-induced psychosis. It is not that. I fought that. Sadly, both fights for long-term stabilization and accurate diagnosis stem from the same barrier, insurer profitability. For an insurer, a diagnosis of drug-induced psychosis is significantly less expensive than a diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder. The consequences of such behavior, as our family has witnessed with Justin, is that insurers view patients with mental health and substance use disorders, which many times coexist, as if they just had a broken arm. The brain does not usually heal in 6 to 8 weeks as a fractured arm would. It takes longer, and quickly pushing these patients out of care ends in horrific cycles our son has endured. As to why I'm hopeful, the answer rests with the legislation that is the subject of this hearing, the Mental Health Parity Act. The bill provides for definitions of medical necessity and general standards of care for mental health and substance use disorders that are informed by independent medical bodies and not by insurers or their third parties. The bill provides for transparency and accountability of insurers, holding them to the simple requirement of keeping their part of the bargain. We pay the premium payments. They should provide the care. The bill requires insurers to develop adequate networks of behavioral health providers to care for Georgia's citizens so that patients and families like ours don't have to go to other states. We went to 3 other states to get help. The bill takes steps to move from addressing mental health challenges as criminal justice matters and addressing them as the public health matters they are. When I had my 4 children, I never imagined that I'd be standing here today advocating for the passage of a mental health bill. But then I get that question, "Tracy, tell me about your children." And I know there's no other place I should be than right here for my son, Justin. And I hope that in the years ahead, that families and their loved ones with mental illness will never have to endure and follow the difficult and frustrating path that our son and family have had to endure. Chair Cooper and members of this committee, Thank you so much for your time, and I hope that you do pass HB 1013.
Thank you, Tracy. I will tell you, Tracy, that your husband is one of the smartest members in the General Assembly and one of the most committed when it comes to this bill. And of course, Mary Margaret is just as smart and just as committed. I won't talk about myself. I'm not sure I'm as smart as the two of them combined, but I'm just as committed to getting this bill through. Thank you for coming. Okay, we are going to set the timer, and let's just start off with, you've got 3 minutes. If you don't need the 3 minutes, don't take them. Let's go with Mike Dvorak, and I'm sorry if I mess up your name. Tell us who you're with, and if I mispronounced your name, please pronounce it correctly.
It's all right, Chairman Cooper. I hadn't seen you in a while. Mike Dvorak, and I'm here representing myself. So, Madam Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak with you today. 2017, I developed major depression with psychosis. This was unusual because I had no prior history of mental illness, and because this type of illness normally starts at a much younger age. I'm over 60 and was then. This illness was the most difficult and challenging thing that I've ever faced. I reached a point where I could have died as a result of my illness. Thankfully, because of a number of factors, including good medical care, I was able to overcome this. This experience gave me a firsthand look at mental health care in Georgia. During the course of my illness, I had both inpatient and outpatient treatment. I had 2 different psychiatrists, went to 2 different hospitals, mental health hospitals. And after a number of different drugs and an extended period of time, I eventually was treated with electroconvulsion therapy, ECT, and that started me onto the road of getting past all of this. This is a very important piece of legislation that is long overdue. And I was going to go through a few of the things that are positives, but, and there's a lot of good things in this bill. There's a lot of good things in this bill, but in the interest of time, I'm going to just skip over that and jump down to a few things that I feel could improve the bill. I think we need to require that our educational professionals are educated in a way that they can understand the signs and symptoms of mental illness, so that then they can notify parents or others so that minors can be examined and treated. The key to mental illness is getting things early and finding out if you've got things that you're dealing with that are only going to mushroom and cause a major crisis if you don't face them now. I think we need to require mental health or require insurance companies to allow patients to go out of network if necessary for treatment. I'm not sure how that is treated right now, but it's important. As I told you, I was in 2 different hospitals and ended up with 2 different doctors. And one of the things that I saw that was a positive that I want to make sure that you keep, and the way I read it, it sounded like it might be something that would come under pressure, is not limiting the number of days of inpatient care. I was in the hospital 68 days over a period of 6 months. So I think that the major shortcoming of this piece of legislation, though, is that it doesn't address the need to educate people about mental illness. We need to educate people at the high school level, both so they can understand what goes on and so that again, if they can see these signs and symptoms, that they'll seek help rather than just try to ignore it. So,
If you can sum and finish.
and certainly. And lastly, there's several commissions that this bill references, and I think that they're important. And it's important to have the various professionals on these commissions. But I also think that you need to have people who've experienced mental illness, because otherwise I don't think you're going to get the full picture. So I want to thank you for your time today and the opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you. And if you are willing to share that, will you share your written comments on your web? Thank you very much. Mary Margaret or Todd, just they will share them. Thank you. Okay. I have Astrid Rose and Allie Ross. Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I feel very blessed to be able to speak about such an important matter that affects the health and the life of so many Georgians. My name is Astrid Ross. I'm the founder and the director of the Mental Health Support Network. We're a nonprofit organization that has a mission and a vision, improving the mental health of all Georgians through education, advocacy, and action. I'm also a career educator and a lead elementary school administrator for a very culturally diverse private school in Gwinnett County. I'm also a special education advocate and a presenter for NAMI. I'm also a suicide survivor. My father, a Vietnam vet, succumbed to suicide when he was 26 years old, and I was only 15 months old. So I've worked over the years and mentored and educated many about the importance of mental health and wellness. Why am I here? I'm here today to share some insight on how I feel and our network feels on making sure that some serious considerations are given to specifics on the HB 1013 bill. I'll be specifically speaking about lines 290 to 293, lines 1013 through to 1061, and lines 1826. We're asking for language access, language support, and culturally, ethnically, and linguistically sensitive services. I want to give you a real world example of why we think that's important. A few years ago, we hired an immigrant teacher that lost her health insurance when she switched from working with the public school system to working in a small private school. The teacher was a Georgia certified teacher. She was highly qualified and competent. She passed all the background checks that are required through the public school system and passed our background and criminal records check to be hired. When she left the public school system, she lost her health insurance. Georgians have a right to privacy about their health care and their medical diagnosis. She had a mental health diagnosis of schizophrenia. Without her medication and without clinical access, she decided to manage her health on her own. After 3 months, she was in full-blown mental health crisis, which included some behavior that caused her apartment complex to call the police. She was setting fire to bushes and chasing children with knives. She didn't show up for work for 3 days. We went to check on her and spoke to some of her neighbors. So myself, as a lead administrator, and another teacher, after she has no family here in Georgia, we went to the Gwinnett County Courthouse and spoke to a judge and signed an affidavit to show that we thought she would be a hurt and harm to herself or to others. We were told that the sheriff's department would come and pick her up. So we went back to her apartment to make sure that she was there and that she would comply with the sheriff's department when they got there. When the sheriff's department arrived, they brought 3 sheriffs to her home. They grabbed her and dragged her out of her apartment as she resisted, and she began to yell in her native language. Now, as a Somali American, they didn't understand her language. She wasn't resisting going to the hospital. In her language, she was telling them, as a Muslim woman, I should not be touched by a man that's not my husband or my family members. She was also screaming in her native language that I'm in t-shirt and shorts. Can I put clothes on? So her language was disregarded. Her culture was disregarded. And these are some of the things that we want in this bill to be considered, that we make sure that we are taking care of the health and the life and the quality of health and life of all Georgians. And that includes those who are not born and raised here. So our immigrant family members and Georgians also have a right to have a bill that supports their existence here in Georgia.
Okay. Have you given us or sent to either of the authors what you would like to
The
see?
line numbers, yes.
The line numbers and so
Yes.
forth?
And I have that here as well.
Okay, you've used up your time. Is there another one? I'm sorry, short time. Is there one specific thing? I mean, I think your example certainly brought home something very important for us to look at. Is there?
Well, I'll make sure that it's listed here, and that actual thing is in reference to those three sections in the bill itself.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
So, I had another person listed on this. Did they, you were speaking?
Sorry, that's my oldest son. He's a member of our nonprofit organization.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming to present. Okay, Jesse Weatherton. And for lobbyists, I'm giving a little bit for other people, but on lobbyists, I'm going to cut you short and ring the bell.
Yes, ma'am. Understood. Well, in that spirit, thank you, Madam Chair. I am Jesse Wethington. I'm here as the President and CEO of the Georgia Association of Health Plans, which is the trade group representing the state's health benefit industry. Good to be back in front of the Health and Human Services Committee. I'll be brief in the interest of time. So since the passage of MPIA, our industry has been required to provide members with benefits that are designed and delivered in a manner that does not discriminate against those with individuals with a mental health or substance use disorder. GHP and our member fully in support of mental health parity. Indeed, there are many members of our association that were members of the Association for Behavioral Health and Wellness, which negotiated the original passage of MPIA in Congress more than 10 years ago. But that being said, as reported by the Tri-Agency's recent report to Congress, there remains work to be done for parity implementation. Challenges remain for us, including lack of providers, which we've heard about, the continuing COVID-19 pandemic, and some specific barriers to access of care, such as the stigma associated with the need for MHSUD services as compared to physical health ailments. GHP fully supports parts 2 through 6 of this bill. We critically think that the workforce investments embodied in part 2 are absolutely necessary for us to help be successful partners with you all in this. We look forward to working with you and the stakeholders, the General Assembly and the Insurance Commissioner to meet the goals that have been set out for us by you all and by Speaker Ralston with this bill. My members have identified one concern. We have provided these outlined in a letter as well to the co-sponsors, sponsor and the committee as chair. So that really focuses in starting on line 58 of LC 338939. That is the definition of generally accepted standards of mental health and substance use disorder care. Our question and what we would be seeking clarity on and have suggested language around an amendment to make clear is whether or not this would prohibit us from continuing to use nationally recognized and developed third-party clinical care and placement protocol guidelines. In addition to those that are sort of delineated or listed from the not-for-profit provider associations listed in the bill, taking that together with the definition of medical necessity that appears throughout part 1. So we think if we could get some clarifying amendments there around adding, the phrases nationally recognized throughout part 1 for those definitions, will make it more clear that we can continue to use those in conjunction with the other standards that are currently developed by groups like ASAM, Locus Colocus, ESSE, that we have seen come up in other jurisdictions related to this issue. Additionally, a suggestion we would make would be around the definition of what falls into mental health or substance use disorder. We've suggested that updated versions of the ICD-10 or DSM be used versus the ones that are delineated in the bill. Thank you.
Okay, I mean, and I'm not trying to be ultra hard on the lobbyist, but they can find us in the halls and in our offices,
Yes, ma'am. We look
as
forward to
they have
continuing our
already
conversation.
done. Okay, Representative Oliver.
Found us, and we have been in good conversation. And this is a very dense and important part of the bill. How you define mental health services and mental health illness is going to dictate who pays for what.
Right.
So I appreciate his energy. Thank you.
All right. And you have turned that in written form?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Devin Orland. I guess we'll start it when they get here.
Hi, my name is Devin Orland. I'm the Legal and Advocacy Director for the Georgia Advocacy Office, Georgia's protection and advocacy system. As the state's protection and advocacy system, we're in a unique position to educate about the potential unintended consequences of this bill. As an initial matter, the changes to the involuntary inpatient criteria could set the state to have the highest hospitalization rates it has had in decades. Georgia, like every other state in the country, is bound by the Olmstead decision, and we have an obligation to serve people in the community when possible. The current standard is that someone must present a substantial or a risk of imminent harm to self or others. The proposed change includes removing the word imminent and adding a provision that allows for involuntary inpatient commitment where there's a reasonable expectation that someone is experiencing a life-endangering crisis or significant psychiatric deterioration in the future. The problem with this is that reasonable to believe that someone who previously experienced a psychiatric crisis may again be faced with similar crisis. Under this standard, virtually anyone who experiences a serious psychiatric disability could be involuntarily committed. The bill expands the scope of the state's ability to involuntarily commit people for outpatient treatment. The bill states that persons should remain connected to community-based options without specifying or funding these options, and without addressing where people will live and how to connect them to services. The bill presumes that Georgia has a robust community-based mental health system where no such system exists. Instead, people will be put in involuntary outpatient commitments so they remain compliant without addressing the underlying need for an effective community-based mental health system. There's no system to set people up with affordable supported housing, supported employment, or other pillars of recovery. There does not appear to be a right to counsel, appeal, or otherwise protected review of the determination that an individual meets outpatient commitment standards. The determination of who meets outpatient commitment standard appears to remain with the private provider of services, which is a direct financial interest in keeping people committed. There is no mechanism for any state agency to audit, oversee, and protect people who end up in outpatient commitment from abuse, unwarranted forced treatment, or to ensure the standards are developed and followed and appropriate. The bill provides for the maintenance of lists and registries for adults and children who experience mental illness without any protections. This will have an immediate and profound chilling effect on the willingness of people to seek support in mental health crisis, especially including teens and young adults who have little or no confidence in the ability of the public or private sector technology to protect any single set of data through the course of their lifetimes and risk the potential to close many career paths. As this bill travels through the legislative process, I'd encourage you to look at the potential unintended consequences of the design. The true way to recovery and parity is through robust community-based mental health system, choice, education, and peer support, and not filling the hospitals with forcing treatment. Thank you.
Very much. And okay, thank you. Okay, Choa, David, are you presenting, or Jamila too, or just you? Okay.
Madam Chair, David Tatum with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. We own and operate Eggleston and Scottish Rite Children's Hospitals. We manage the Hugh Spalding Hospital for the Grady System. We own and operate the Marcus Autism Center and about 20 outpatient centers around the area. We see kids from all 159 counties in the state and every one of your districts. We stand in strong support of this legislation. I do want to reference one particular section. I think it's line number 1707 in the original and 1713 on the sub. And the purpose of this was to find a way to evaluate those pediatric patients who are frequent utilizers of crisis services in mental health. We operate emergency rooms at Eggleston, Scottish Rite, and Hugh Spalding. And we have a number of patients that come into those rooms that we don't know where they came from. When they are referred out, we lose touch with them. Sometimes we don't have information from the payers. And it's very difficult for the system to come up with an effective treatment plan when you don't know who's coming in and what people that are coming in are getting or what they're going to get, where they're going. We have reached out to the authors. We provided in writing some suggested language. We found them in the hall and in their offices. It changes the word registry, which some people had an issue with, to care coordination system, but it accomplishes the same thing. And I want to bring to your attention the import of this. In 2017, children experienced 9,431 pediatric mental health visits in our emergency rooms. 5 years later, last year, that doubled to 18,109. And for the authors, Representative Oliver, 13,445 of those came from DeKalb County, and Representative Jones, 1,283 came from Forsyth County. We have evaluated the number of frequent utilizers. We've identified 66. Some of these kids have come in for behavioral health care with us 41 times, 25 times, 24 times, 18 times. One came in over 60 times. And I would argue that is not a system that is serving the needs of that child.
Just very briefly, there are two different registries set forth in the bill. We've gotten good comments from people, and CHOA and others are helping us work on that. We all have HIPAA constraints. That is the federal law. That is the state law. Privacy is mandated, and we're working with these lists to figure out how to accommodate what the goal is under the authorities and mandates of the HIPAA law and others. And CHOA has been helpful in their comments on that section beginning at 1713. Thank you.
Thank you for that work. So, and thanks to CHOA for helping us on that. Okay. Helen Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the committee and to the co-sponsors. I'm Helen Robinson with the Carter Center Mental Health Program, and today I'm representing the Georgia Parity Collaborative. This is a group of over 40 statewide organizations working to advance parity and insurance coverage of behavioral health care in Georgia. Many of the members are here today. You also have a letter in your packets, and you can see the breadth of the organizations that are concerned about parity. The first section of the Mental Health Parity Act will help Georgians access affordable mental health and substance use treatment that they need for themselves and their children by ensuring that public and private health insurance plans cover behavioral health equitably with physical health. Lack of parity leads to insurance companies denying coverage for medically necessary behavioral health treatment. It leads to long wait times and lack of behavioral health providers, especially in our rural areas. It leads to children and adults not receiving early intervention that can prevent a crisis down the road. And it leads to families paying out of pocket for needed care due to arbitrary limits and denials. And ultimately, it leads to the state covering and paying for the treatment that insurance companies should be paying for. The provisions in Part 1 of the Mental Health Parity Act are essential to strengthening our state's monitoring, reporting, and enforcement of behavioral health parity. They include having DCH and the Department of Insurance regularly monitor parity compliance and take action when violations occur, including with those market conduct exams. It's asked for dedicated staff in those agencies to enforce parity. It makes it easier for families to file complaints with the state when there are parity violations. It makes parity compliance data transparent and publicly available. And it ensures that medical necessity is based on generally accepted standards of care. Finally, it aligns our existing code sections for our individual, small, and large group insurance plans to remove outdated provisions that do allow for limiting days and that sort of thing, and makes the definition of mental health and substance use disorder consistent with current clinical standards. And it is important to note that the definitions in that part are very important because they allow us to have a standard and not to provide for circular definitions that don't lead us to something we can all understand. I just want to conclude by saying that the bill is called the Mental Health Parity Act because it starts with parity, and parity is the linchpin for improving access to care and addressing our workforce shortages at this critical time in our state. And as the chair knows, there is no health without mental health. Thank you very much.
Seconds under your time. And I suggest that we start calling this the Mental Health Parity Act, even though that's a mouthful, instead of 1013. So, and because one of the things we're trying to do in the act is to decrease the number of 1013s issued in this state. Am I not right to the authors? So the Mental Health Parity Act, just everybody get used to saying it. Okay. Gabrielle Carter.
Hello, Madam Chair and the rest of the committee. My name is Gabriel Carter, and I am representing the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia. And I'm here to express our overwhelming support for the Mental Health Parity Act. I won't say the number. But county commissioners from all 159 counties gathered together, both Republican and Democrat, to say that mental health reform will be one of our top legislative priorities this year for this legislative session. We believe that the greatest effects of a failing mental health care system are often seen at the local level. Therefore, the solutions must also be localized. County jails, as some of the commission have stated, that county jails have unfortunately become default housing for many people facing mental health crisis. Therefore, ACCG, we stand in full agreement that vulnerable people who are facing mental health challenges deserve to be treated in places that are more equipped to aid them during these crises. Therefore, we want to work with the state, be partners with the state to make sure that we have the necessary resources to be able to effectively and efficiently address the magnitude of this challenge. In conclusion, I want to say, committee members, this is not just a civic imperative, but it is a moral one, and we are encouraging you to vote in the affirmative for this bill. Thank you for your time, and I'll stay for any questions if there are any, Madam Chair.
We're not taking questions,
Perfect.
but you're welcome to visit us and talk to any of our legislators at any
Perfect.
time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So much.
Chris Johnson.
Hi there.
Hi.
My name is Chris Johnson. I am a person in long-term recovery. What that means for me is it's been over 13 years since my mental health concerns prevented me from leading a full, productive, and rewarding life. Today, I'm an active and participating member of my family, my community, and my workplace. Today, I'm the Director of Communications for the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network, and we are here today to voice strong support for the passage of this bill as written. At the same time, we do have some concerns about some small parts of it, primarily the involuntary commitment standards. We feel strongly that they should remain as they are. We have some alternative language that we've developed that we will provide you. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. I didn't know if I was going to be speaking
Doing
today or
fine.
not, so thank you.
And I'll take a few seconds and give you extra thank you for your years of being, I don't know what you call it now in mental health, non-crisis, but congratulations.
Mental health recovery.
Okay, total recovery. Okay. So go ahead.
So the involuntary commitment standard is concerning also the standard of the policeman to be able to just identify someone who's in a mental health crisis or mental health concern. I think that has the same problems that the other standards that we were talking about before had. And I think that's it. I'm sorry, I didn't.
And did you say you had them in written form?
We do.
And
I do.
has anybody given those to the authors yet?
No, but we will.
Okay, be sure you do. And, they will look at them very carefully.
Great. Thank you.
And thank you for coming. And I'm very, proud for your years of recovery. Now that I get straight to what to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
And for your work to help others. Bethany Shera.
Hi, I'm Bethany Scherer with Medical Association of Georgia. Since I'm sure all of you know where to find me, I'm going to keep this very brief and just give our sincere thanks for all of the work that has gone into this bill. We are deeply appreciative and deeply supportive of especially the mental health parity portions of this, access to mental health care, and making sure that that's, access to mental health care is access to health care, and we want to preserve that. So thank you.
For the committee members, we had a very interesting committee meeting yesterday that went on quite a while on one bill. And I would like to say that bill was not being brought to you by the body of physicians in our state, or MAG or anything. It seemed to devolve into that, where it seemed like the medical association or so forth was bringing the bill. That is not true. It was brought by, what is it you call them that want to do, what's the name of the company? No. 800 what? 100 Vision or whatever that is. I don't wear contact lens, so I couldn't remember the name of 1-800 contacts or something like that. So just to clear up what was a misconception from yesterday's meeting. Healthcare can be real interesting at times. Mary Margaret should come visit us. So Sergio Mendez. I think, did I pronounce it correctly?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm here with the Latino Community Fund, Georgia. We work a lot with the Hispanic, Latino, refugee minority groups out here in Georgia. And I, along with our partners today, will echo our support for language access. A lot of the community we work with are not primarily English speaking, and even if they are, if you do know another language, we all tend to think in one language and then translate when we need to, and that takes some time, and some complex issues cannot be expressed. Personally, I am the son of a single mother who was an immigrant who had a little English skills, and I had an older brother who had mental health issues from an early age. Even if there had been resources for us at that point, for my mom, I doubt she would have known how to tap into them, not knowing the English language proficiently. That led to a brother who became a teenager who did poorly in school, which led to him joining gangs and abusing drugs and entering the criminal justice system. Anyways, it became a cycle when he was never able to exit. I'd also like to draw some parallels to my time in the military, which is kind of a microcosm of the wider citizenship. Everyone's represented in the military, from people from all walks of life. And a lot of the militaries obviously goes through stressors, like people in our community. And a lot of that leads to mental health issues, particularly depression, which in the military leads to suicide. And we know that happens out in the community as well. Unfortunately, a lot of people in the military do not seek out mental health support because of the stigma. And because of what might happen, it follows them throughout their career, which can impact their ability to get security clearances. I'm in military intelligence, and so it's a big issue for us. And so that kind of, I'm drawing a parallel to our community and the provision where there is a database. A lot of people won't want to seek out resources if it's going to follow them for the rest of their life, especially if they're seeking to go through an immigration system, naturalization system. So that's also a concern that we have as it relates to the community we serve. Thank you.
Very much. I think that to all the people that are the advocates, and when the bill passes, then I would ask everyone that works with groups of people across our state to help get the word out about the fact of what the bill does. One of the problems of the legislature, at least I believe, is the fact that when we pass a bill, we have no money to advertise it as, public policy issues are out on the news. The news and the word gets out through, like if it's a medical bill, then the Medical Association of Georgia to its members will get the message out. But even not all doctors belong to the Medical Association. Or if it's a lawyer's bill or the police chiefs, they will send out that information. But that misses people, especially the average citizen. And so passing the bill is going to take a lot of work by all of us to get the information out to the citizens of Georgia. And as to stigma, if we do nothing else, and I'm confident we're going to do a lot more, passing parity, I believe, will help decrease the stigma, because as a legislative body, we will be saying that we believe having a mental illness is no different than having a medical illness, such as heart disease or arthritis. And that is a big message that we need to get out. And hopefully the parity part will say that. Thank you for coming to talk to us about the languages. And okay, Erica Ferner. Oh, sorry, Sitkoff. Missed the last name. And always tell us who you're with when you come up to testify.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members, and sponsors of the bill. My name is Erica Finner-Sitkoff. I'm the Executive Director of Voices for Georgia's Children, and I am also a licensed clinical child psychologist. So between that and our holistic whole child approach to child policy and advocacy, you can imagine how thrilling it is to see the Mental Health Parity Act taken up for consideration with this committee. I know there are a lot of people yet to testify, so I will be brief. First, we are extremely pleased with the direction of this bill as it pertains to parity, workforce development, and to infants, children, and adolescents. We are also very grateful to the sponsors for their consideration of a number of minor suggestions we submitted prior to this hearing. We haven't seen the sub yet, but we are hopeful that those considerations are incorporated. I won't belabor those points here and just simply say thank you. Also, I would like to thank Representatives Jones and Oliver for their work on a few remaining child-relevant provisions, which can be more complicated to get right in order to avoid problematic, unintended consequences. The problems these sections seek to solve are indeed worthy of the work, and we are grateful to all of you for the ongoing discussions to three main areas. One, help clinicians have what they need to better serve kids who frequent the emergency departments and other pediatric settings. We're grateful for the opportunity to work closely with SHOA and the sponsors on this issue. Two, to determine efficient, effective, and confidential ways for state agencies to share, collect, disaggregate, and analyze data. And three, to ensure the most seamless ways to guarantee payment for and delivery of behavioral health services and treatment to infants, children, and youth. Please know that we are standing by ready to help. We know you are working tirelessly on it, and we are here day and night for whatever you need. Thank you again very much for the opportunity to speak on the Mental Health Parity Act.
Thank you. And what you do for children in our state. And for being in the mental health, realm of, treatment. Thank goodness. We are so short of mental health providers in our state. Abdul Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Representatives Jones and Oliver, members of the commission. My name is Abdul Henderson, and I am the Executive Director of Mental Health America of Georgia. I'm also a former combat veteran of the Iraq War, served in the Marines for 8 years. Just want to share with you a couple points on the state of mental health in Georgia. Currently, we rank 48th in regard to mental health care access. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the state. On average, one person dies by suicide every 6 hours. Dawson County has led the state in death by suicide for the last 11 years. Decatur County, Dawson County, Lee County, and Haralson County rank in the top 20 in the United States for severe depression and/or suicidal ideation. The state is plagued with a workforce shortage, a severe one, and the Department of Corrections, as we heard earlier from the chief, is the largest provider of mental health services in the state. I support the Mental Health Parity Act because it seeks to address all of these issues. It's not perfect, but it's a good foundation to move us in the right direction. Our 48th ranking in mental health care access, that data is 2 years old. That's from 2019. The new information will come out sometime in the spring of this year. It's going to get worse. So I hope that in good faith, we can work all together to improve the system of care in this state. While I do support the Mental Health Parity Act, I do welcome any provisions that strengthen the bill, not weaken it, especially on the parity side. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments and for saying, no bill is perfect. And it's going to take some time to implement all of this bill. It's certainly going to take us time to develop more workers than the amounts that we need. But as you realized, it's a start and it's a good foundation. And it sets us on the right course to reaching and helping the citizens of our state. So thank you. Gareth Finley.
Hi, I'm Gareth Finley and I have line numbers. I'm an independent citizen living in Walton County. I'm really nervous. I don't usually talk in public, but I drove here because it seemed very important. I prefer to write out my concerns, so I have a handout and I have given it. And there is unacceptable language in the bill that would change the standards for police detention of Georgia children and adults and court-ordered treatment. And new databases, they're called right now a registry and a repository, but you could change the name. They're databases of children and adults associated with, quote, high usage of resources. I speak as someone who is subject to these standards myself. I have been brought to the hospital by county sheriff for involuntary psychiatric treatment. I have severe and persistent mental illness. As recently as November of 2021, I was involuntarily locked up for observation and treatment in a psychiatric hospital, so I'll be on the registry. It is reasonable to predict that my psychiatric deterioration may occur again in the future. I really, really appreciate the talk of conversation and discussion and difficult issues. Representative Oliver spoke about a national conversation going on, and this is a conversation. My experience is as both a consumer mental health services and a provider. I'm also a Georgia licensed social worker, earned my degree at UGA, national champions. And I chose this career to help others like myself. And I have assisted in preparing and working with men and women who were being involuntarily detained and admitted. So it's happened to me and I've helped it happen to others. I am not unique. There are thousands of people in our mental health workforce in Georgia who meet this description, including thousands of certified peer specialists.
And we, the people who were directly affected as patients, were not included in the commission that drafted this legislation. There was no seat on the commission reserved for someone who experiences the conditions that y'all are so kindly and ambitiously attempting to help. I believe that consensus building and compromise are important, and I'm so happy that y'all are in conversation, but conversations need to have more than one side. The process happened in 2009 when the Georgia General Assembly, in a proud accomplishment, came together to create the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. And back in 2009, this was done by a bipartisan coalition. Representative Oliver was part of it, and it fully involved people with mental health disorders, people like myself. And the language to open the commitment standard was proposed and considered back then and wisely rejected. Georgia has clear and protective standards for involuntary detention, observation, and treatment for mental health purposes. These standards should be left in place just as they were in 2009, which was the last time that the conversation included people with my voice. And I'm so nervous. I have privately talked to dozens of people, one-on-one, including many of those in this room. And off the record, many will say they are either neutral or opposed to these provisions of this bill. Off the record. I'm here to be on the record. I'm not neutral. These lines 1193 to 1215, lines 1707 through 1720, lines 1093 through 1109 would create a sweeping violation of privacy and infringe on the constitutional rights of the people of Georgia to be secure in our persons from unreasonable seizure by the government. This is disastrous and catastrophic language that must be removed to protect the children, adults, and families in Georgia. Thank you.
And for going on the record. Jeff Breedlove.
Thank you, Chairman Cooper. I'm Jeff Breedlove. I'm a person in long-term recovery, and I'm with the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse. And yes, I am a lobbyist, but I'm a peer. I'm a person that has survived the hell of addiction and mental health. I have seen and lived through the reality of treatment, and I stand before you knowing the hope and joy of recovery. I almost died from this disease, and I'm one of the lucky ones because I did not die. The work you're doing today is not about a packet in front of you, because behind every docket that you look at, every document you look at, every PowerPoint you see, every memo you get, and every dollar sign you consider is a Georgian in crisis, and families are suffering. The CDC told us that this past year, over 100,000 people died from opioid overdoses alone, and that was the first time it was triple digits. And Dr. Toomey tells us that the highest rate of admissions to emergency departments during COVID in Georgia has been overdoses. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The work you're doing is saving lives. The Georgia Council on Substance Abuse is proud to partner with the Mental Health Policy Alliance. We've been working for 2 years. Thanks to Chairman Tanner, he has brought in the advocates. We've had a seat at the table. The commission has listened and heard our concerns. This is not a perfect bill, but it's a bill designed to pass and save lives. We welcome positive policy changes and amendments. As Abdul said, there's always a new idea that can make things better, but the spirit of this bill, we hope will stay intact because it will save lives. And I'll end with this. Someone earlier said there's still work to be done when it comes to parity. With due respect, that federal law is 14 years old. enough getting the work done. Georgia families, my family, who is in debt because there isn't coverage. We deserve what we're paying for. We deserve what we're entitled to under federal law. There's no more work to be done. It's time to enforce federal law in Georgia when it comes to parity. Full stop. No more excuses. And last, just one more time, what a historic day this is for the peer community. There are 800,000 people in recovery in Georgia, 23 million in the United States, according to SAMHSA. And we thank you. This bill moves forward with our full support. We thank everybody from the governor to the speaker, to the commission with Chairman Tanner, to the presenters of this bill, and to Chairman Cooper. And yes, eventually, our friends in the Senate. Please save our lives. Thank you very much.
I think it's Whitney Griggs. I can't, I think the first is a G. If I'm wrong, sorry. Is it Griggs? Oh, good.
My name is Whitney Griggs. I am the health policy analyst with Georgians for a Healthy Future. Georgians for a Healthy Future is a nonprofit organization that's focused on ensuring that all Georgians have access to the health care that they need so they can live healthy lives and be active members of their community. And I want to start by saying thank you to everyone in this room that has worked so diligently on this bill. It is truly a labor of passion and just shows how much you all care for so many Georgians that have had their lives touched by mental health. And I'm honored to be able to stand up here today and have a chance to speak on the bill. I'd like to specifically speak on Section 1, the parity section of the bill. We believe that the parity provisions are robust and strong enough as written to meaningfully improve access to mental health treatment for millions of Georgians. But we also believe that the parity portion needs to remain as written, including the definitions contained in the section to ensure the strongest protections for all Georgians. And specifically, we believe that the guidelines of generally accepted standards of care are critical to include to ensure that insurers' criteria is in line with the criteria that physicians and other providers use when diagnosing and treating mental health conditions. The current language of the bill does not ban the use of any third-party providers that insurers contract with, but rather requires that they are also using generally accepted standards of care. And the last point that I'll make on that is that federal courts have said that the parity standard for insurers should follow the generally accepted standards of care. And for Georgia's law to be in line with federal law, the bill maintains the medically necessary generally accepted standards of care will be in line with what federal courts have already decided. Thank you very much.
David Schaefer. We just know another David Schaefer around here. So I was sort of waiting to see who showed up.
He is much better looking, I can tell you that.
Oh, I don't know about that.
So good afternoon, Chairman Cooper, members of the committee. My name is David Schaefer, and I'm the Research Director at the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute. I'm here in a lobbying capacity, but as I'm hearing, sometimes personal experience overlaps with what you do. And I think that's the case for me today. We did want to thank the sponsors of the Mental Health Parity Act for this historic legislation and the opportunity it presents to move Georgia's behavioral health care in a new direction. We strongly support the provisions related to mental health parity and the opportunity to ensure greater payment for behavioral health services through parity enforcement. We have some other comments that we're going to offer on parts 3 and 4, but we will defer those to a later time and shorten our comments here today.
In writing.
Yes.
To the others.
So I need to offer up 2 anecdotes as to why this is important generally and maybe why it's important specifically. There's 2 bookends to this policy for me, and there's 2 bookends to the experience too. On March 3rd, 2015, I lost my brother to suicide 2 minutes after I hung up the phone with him for our last conversation. I did not know what he was going to do, but as I was struggling to think of the resources to which he might have access, I didn't know it was already too late. So some of my comments here are in that context, as well as the bigger context that we pursue at GBPI. Also, having that background of suicide and losing a sibling to depression, for 20 years, I've been an advocate for the immigrant community, stopping deportations, trying to help individuals who are fleeing for their lives and applying for asylum, as well as generally advocating for the immigrant community. The other bookend of this story for me is a few years ago, maybe 1 year after I lost my brother, someone came into the agency I was working for and saw somebody they needed to see, who spoke the language they needed to speak, and confessed to them that that day they were going to end their life. They did not end their life. They're still fine and they are well. And as I've processed for a few years now, why one lived and why one died, I think it comes down to this. It comes down to somebody hearing you clearly and connecting you quickly with the services that are needed. In keeping with that, there's a few lines in this policy that I imagine that others will lift up that are important to us. Lines 160 to 165, lines 327 to 333. This is a good start, including language access provisions around what patient rights are available to individuals, and the complaint process for mental health parity violations will be a good step in the right direction. I don't want us to stop there. I think there's more that we need to do those two things. Listen carefully and clearly, and connect people to services quickly. So in closing, thank you for hearing us today. We wanted to lift up this issue of language access in the specific and in the broad. And I will continue to think about the two bookends to this experience. And I also think one of the reasons that people live instead of die is because we have these discussions in public and we talk about them clearly and we put resources behind what is needed to help people be well and live. Thank you.
And I'm sorry for your loss. And I think I've heard the discussion that this is among the authors and all, that this is just a start. And it's one of the things that we do in the legislature. Sometimes you start off with small bites. However, this is a great big bite that's going to be followed by a lot of small bites in the coming years as we move forward on this. Becky Riles and Dr. Teresa Jacobs, or one or the other.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Becky Riles, representing the Association for Primary Care, which is the member association for all community health centers in Georgia, in your community, serving your constituents. On behalf of the 600,000 patients we serve, we come in gratitude for Speaker Ralston, the sponsors of this legislation, and all of you on this committee for considering the Mental Health Parity Act. It's a piece of legislation whose time has come, and we're grateful that it has come. Dr. Teresa Jacobs is the clinical director for the association, working with all the community health centers in Georgia. And I will yield the balance of my time to Dr. Jacobs to bring her clinical perspective in support of the mental health parity bill. Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for having us. As you heard Becky say, we're in total support of this. This is, I want to say, let the church say amen. So finally, the one thing though that we would point out parity, perfect, wonderful, but it's the same day visits that we have concerned about because we don't get paid. So if I see a patient for diabetes, hypertension, I see a kid for well child check, for asthma, and they're having some sort of mental health issue or concern, we can do a warm handoff, but none of us get paid for that visit at all. And so if somebody can help us in that area, we can help keep those folks out of that emergency room because we can do it right there in the clinic and get paid for it and do great care. But same day care, they only pay us for one visit, and that's usually my visit, which is the medical visit. And so when we at the school-based programs, we have a number of school-based programs throughout the state of Georgia. It would be just super when we see those kids in those clinics, if we can do telehealth via for mental health as well and get paid for those visits on the same day. We would absolutely love that. The other thing is, before I end, MAT and the accountability courts, we do have a health center that's already a partner. And guys, those graduations are fantastic to see folks that are sober, that are recovering, that are graduating from high school, they're graduating from college, they have jobs, they are great citizens in their community, they're with their families, and they're out of the court system. And so we are here we're committed to help with the hard work. We're your partners, so we're here for you. So thank you. Thank you.
Let's see. Elise Blassen. Okay. What? Blassen game? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, our bill sponsors. My name is Elise Blassengame, and I'm here as a volunteer today. I'm on the board of Postpartum Support International Georgia chapter, and we provide free mental health, maternal mental health services in partnership with DPH. We provide training for providers who work in the perinatal period. I think I don't need to tell you all this, but perinatal mental illness is the leading cause of complication around childbirth. So in pregnancy and the immediate postpartum period, we just want to say two things, really. We want to applaud the bill sponsors for including that perinatal mental health language. That is a huge win for Georgia, specifically the lines that are from lines 1353 through 1360 regarding peer support, because I think has been stated, peer support is one of the most effective interventions for long-term recovery in perinatal mental health. We would also humbly request that maybe some similar language could be added to line 1337. That's around the community service boards. So just the addition, that's another place where it's really important to have that perinatal and early childhood mental health component. Not a big addition, but just something we'd love to see. Again, thank you so much for your time today and for just letting us have this moment. And thank you to all the advocates in the room who have made the time to be here and to push this forward. We're very appreciative.
Elise, have you put that into writing?
Yes, ma'am. It's in your
Okay.
email as
Just
well as
so
the bill
that-
sponsors.
Right, that we didn't. Okay, Mura H. Not gonna, Fuentes? Fuentes, okay.
My name is Maria Fuentes. I'm actually a legal and medical interpreter. However, as the lady just before me mentioned, I was affected by this issue. I just want to give Mr. Jones and Mrs. Jones a big hug right now. Just want to say, because my baby was taken from me when she was 10 days old. My baby was taken from me by the courts when she was 10 days old. That's huge. That's never been a relationship with my child that's been recovered, let's say. However, since then, like many of us who are here, this makes our heart beat. And in mine, more than once. And thank God I had another child. However, my second son has a diagnosis of schizophrenia. The onset was in his 20s. Currently, he is at a facility called St. Isla in Waycross, Georgia, which is where I traveled from today. My friends are like you. judges, lawyers. I have a wonderful education. I speak Spanish and English. I advocate for many people, obviously, in my role and in the medical and legal field. That being said, I have gone through your document comprehensively. I want to thank everyone here because this means a lot. I have 3 points to make. Sorry, I didn't bring a glass of water. So in the form of HIPAA, our rights are not protected. And I know that we cannot debunk federal law because it trumps state law. However, I think there's a place to protect clients and their parents. And in the lines that you have the document, and like I said, I can do this in writing myself. I don't want to go through all the points that I've made. I just want to keep this, I think, more personal for you to hear me. In the fact that parents such as Mr. and Mrs. Jones are deprived of their rights because they are not allowed to advocate for their children, particularly when they become adults. So that being said, a loved one needs to be there in its stead or assigned, which brings me to my next point. A court-ordered transition would be most appropriate in what would become the status of involuntary to voluntary, so that someone such as Miss Oliver, right? Mrs. Oliver, yes, who is a former magistrate judge, would understand a case like mine and be before me and want to know how that family follows up with, you know, the mom was placed in a hospital and has no rights, because that's exactly what happened year after year, because it's a stigma and a fear and a problem that, let's just say, Britney Spears took 13 years to remove a conservatorship only recently. That says a lot. My last point are consequences. And again, in the document, I see the word task force. And that being said, and no offense to the police or the courts or anyone. However, there's an abrogation of rights. Only, like I said, even in this last week, am I told by the medical staff at the jail where my son was taken, because that way he can get help in the state of Georgia. He was not given his meds. And the answer is, I don't have to know. So that is true by law because of what we're saying.
You asked, he wasn't given his meds and you were asking why, and they said you didn't need to know.
That's exactly right. Okay. So there are no consequences, is what I'm saying, for the police to be policed, and no disrespect towards the police or the problem that we're dealing with. I do have some ideas. I prefer not to use up more of the time so that everyone else can also have their time.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming all the way from Waycross. I really appreciate your testimony. Thank you. Kim Jones.
Hello, members of the committee. I am not Kim Jones. Kim Jones just whispered into my ear as she left for another meeting and asked me to come up on her behalf. As you all know, Kim Jones has been a leader in this effort for many years. She's a member of the Behavioral Health Reform and Innovation Commission and had prepared some remarks, but had a conflict. I've been working with Kim Jones as I am working with the Center for Victims of Torture, and we are a member of the Georgia Mental Health Policy Partnership. We've been meeting every week, every Friday, to advance the provisions that you have currently in this bill. Those meetings are open to everybody, and I'm glad to see many of the folks here today advocates from across the state participate in those weekly meetings. And I rise today to share Kim Jones and NAMI Georgia's deep, deep gratitude for the work of everyone here, in particular, the sponsors of this bill, and to support it wholeheartedly. I'd also like to echo that support on behalf of the more than dozen, correct me if I'm wrong, members of the Georgia Mental Health Policy Partnership, which include the American Federation for Suicide Prevention, the Mental Health of America, NAMI, Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network, Georgia Psychological Association, and many, many more. So thank you very much for allowing me to fill in at the last minute for Kim Jones. I did not say my name? Ah, I'm Darlene Lynch, and I work for the Center for Victims of Torture. Thank you.
All right, well, speaking of that, we have another person from that group, Jessica Douglas.
I guess you get to hear from us back to back. Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Jessica Douglas with the Center for Victims of Torture in Georgia. CVT is a nonprofit organization with nearly 4 decades of experience providing mental health care to survivors of war, torture, and other forms of human cruelty. CVT established a center in Georgia in 2016 to fill a profound gap in mental health services for the Georgia's growing refugee and immigrant population. Today, CVT is the only survivor of torture and trauma treatment program in Georgia and is one of the few mental health providers that offer culturally and linguistically appropriate care. We rise today to show our full support for the Mental Health Parity Act. We've been active members of the Georgia Mental Health Policy Partnership, which has been working towards this bill for years, and we are excited and thankful to see it come to fruition. We also know that 1 in 10 Georgians is foreign-born, and that number is on the rise. And thus, we urge the committee to consider small modifications to the Mental Health Parity Act that would make it more effective and inclusive, including ensuring that at lines 160 through 165 and 327 through 333, that the parity complaint process is accessible to Georgians who speak different languages by providing needed translation services. At lines 290 through 293, ensuring that Georgia's health entities are compliant with naturally, culturally, and linguistically appropriate services standards. And at lines 1441 through 1447, ensuring that co-responder teams include linguistically and culturally sensitive interpreters. I also have this available in writing for the authors of the bill, and I'd like to thank you for your time and consideration.
Heather Breeden. Hi, Heather.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Heather Breeden. I am the Senior Manager of Advocacy for the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. We are proud members of the Georgia Mental Health Policy Partnership. MS is the most common cause of non-traumatic disability for young adults. Because individuals diagnosed with MS often look just fine, the reality of the need for behavioral health services was not discussed until recently within the MS community. The reality is that MS causes physiological changes to the brain, often resulting in cognitive and emotional challenges, in addition to the tremendous impacts of being diagnosed with a serious, chronic, and expensive disease. In the past 2 years, since the National MS Society has prioritized mental health, an overwhelming number of individuals and neurologists have come forward expressing serious frustrations about things like obtaining neuropsych exams for newly diagnosed Medicaid patients, accessing psychiatrists and other professionals who are in network for their patients, and the challenges of prior authorizations for necessary psychiatric medications for things like depression and anxiety. We ask that you maintain robust parity and workforce development provisions in this bill. We appreciate the committee's hard work in addition to the very comprehensive work of the Behavioral Health Innovation and Reform Commission.
Krista Stevens?
Good afternoon. I'm Krista Stevens, and I'm with Autism Speaks, which is a national organization dedicated to promoting solutions for those affected by autism across the spectrum throughout the country. And I am thankful to be with you today to express our strong support for this legislation. The CDC estimates that 1 in 44 individuals under age 21 in the United States are affected by autism, meaning they have an autism diagnosis. And as you know, autism is a condition, as you may know, autism is a condition in the DSM-4 or DSM-5 actually. Now, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that is used for as the standard for diagnosing psychiatric conditions. Treatment recommendations as well as payment by the healthcare system depends on that DSM diagnosis. Autistic individuals need and thrive from a variety of therapies. These services include treatments for common comorbidities that often go with autism, such as seizure, sleep, and gastrointestinal disorders, as well as psychiatric conditions like depression and anxiety. But with appropriate and adequate healthcare, those with autism can achieve high levels of education, independent living, employment, all of the things we want for our family members. Autism Speaks strongly supports the Mental Health Parity Act, which firmly establishes the principle of mental health parity for Georgians and solidifies their access to medically necessary services. Most importantly, this legislation provides a precise definition of medical necessity and appropriate processes for determinations of care and utilization review. And other speakers have commented, the key phrase there is generally accepted standards of care. And that's most what we're interested in. Without those definitions being as precise as they are in the legislation, many autistic individuals face coverage gaps and treatment limits that will prohibit them or limit their potential. And so we thank you for the work that you're doing on this massive undertaking, and we are very appreciative of the time you've spent on it. Thank you.
Anna Adams.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I also want to thank the bill's author, Speaker Ralston, and the entire workforce, or rather the Behavioral Health Commission, for working tirelessly on this issue and coming up with a bill that is so needed in the state of Georgia. I won't take a lot of your time. We have submitted comments to the author and to Chair Cooper, and I will, for the benefit of the audience and the rest of the committee members, those comments are simply efforts to try to strengthen the bill and then to clarify a couple of areas where there may be some infrequent behavioral health encounters that we want to make sure don't fall through the cracks. So on behalf of our more than 165 member hospitals, 16 of those being exclusive psychiatric facilities in the state of Georgia, I want to thank you, and we look forward to continuing to work with you on this effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have seen those comments, and several of them would be definite additions to the bill. Thank you for that. And to all of you that have submitted suggestions, and both in pros and cons, we really do appreciate it. This means that there have been a lot of other eyes on the bill besides the authors, and for us to take under consideration as we develop the bill, it goes further. Belissa Urbina.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Belisa Urbina. I am CEO and co-founder of Ser Familia. We're a nonprofit that provides family, mental, and social services to Latinos And I just wanted to, express my support for the bill and also highlight some areas that I think that are very important. Another work that Sur Familia has been doing is in partnership with DAMI, providing education for law enforcement in how to deal with mental health crises and communities that have limited English proficiency, like Latinos. And I think it's very important the area that talks about workforce development. To give you an idea, Sur Familia is quite unique in the fact that we have a psychologist, counselors, social workers, peer support that all speak Spanish. And we have a contracted psychiatrist that is the only psychiatrist in the state that deals with youth and children that it is of a Latino origin. So there is a tremendous disparity. We have more than 1 million Latinos in the state, but we have less than 20 psychologists that can speak Spanish and that can serve this community with a cultural lens, because many times it's not speaking the language, it's also understanding the culture. It has been highlighted how important it is to provide services in the person's native language when things, not only serious mental illness, but also we have not talked today enough about traumatic events like a rape, like cases of severe domestic violence, which is many of the clients that we see. We require the intervention of mental health professionals to help, those victims to recover from the trauma. And there is a tremendous disparity. To give you an idea, in order to help create capacity, we are bringing mental health professionals from other states and creating incentives for people to move to Georgia that speak the language. So any efforts that can be made to improve clinical workforce capacity will be extremely welcome from not only us, but also all other agencies that serve this population. The pandemic has only exacerbated this, and we know it. To give you an example, during the year 2021, we received 231% more referrals for child sexual abuse. 231 more referrals for child sexual abuse. We have nowhere to send many of these kids and their families because many times there's no capacity. The other day, I got a call from one of the community service boards, one of the clinicians, and she was concerned because another clinician was using a 13-year-old child to serve as an interpreter on the counseling sessions of a mother that had been raped. So we're not improving the mom's situation. We're just worsening and creating another trauma victim by having this child, be the interpreter. So we applaud the efforts that are being done. And I think it's a great step. What you have embarked on is very comprehensive. It is providing a lot of support. Happy to help in any way that we can, because I guess that all of us have to support the bill and provide solutions in any manner. We have also some specific recommendations that we are sending via email, and more than happy to be here for you guys. Thank you so much for this.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for the work you do. Latino people are certainly add to the variety that we have in our state and are welcome here, and we do need to be very cognizant of the people, all the different nationalities that come, and trying to reach them with their language and to assimilate them into our culture. Thank you. Jamil, and I know I probably butchered it. I apologize to everybody. Sometimes I have trouble with the English language. So
I do too.
Apologize if I messed up everybody's names.
Good afternoon, Chair Cooper, and thank you. My name is Javeria Jamil, and I'm the Legal and Policy Director for CARE Georgia. We are a civil rights organization serving Georgia's Muslim community. Thank you for the opportunity to provide public comment today, and thank you to everyone who's drafted and worked on this amazing bill. Over the past few years, we've had at least 2 incidents in the Muslim community where friends and family have called 911 to help community members undergoing a mental health crisis, and the incident ended with the police fatally shooting those community members. Those deaths perhaps could have been avoided if the responding police officers were accompanied by mental health professionals to help de-escalate the situation. Thus, at CARE Georgia, we're genuinely looking forward to the creation of the pilot co-response teams. However, we also know through these 2 tragic incidents through the experiences of other community members and through our conversations with service providers, that when bilingual people undergo a mental health crisis, they often revert to their native language, regardless of their level of English proficiency. In both the incidents I mentioned earlier, the affected community members were speaking in their native language when they were going through the mental health crisis. In one of these incidents, friends called 911 at least 6 times before the fatal 7th time. Every time the police arrived, I noted in their police report that there was a communication barrier because the person who was undergoing the crisis did not speak English. In the other incident, the impacted community member spoke fluent English, but reverted to their native language during the mental health crisis. As has already been mentioned, 10% of Georgia residents are immigrants, and many, if not most, speak a language other than English at home. With the influx of Afghan refugees and other refugees fleeing war and decades of trauma, resettling in Georgia, and the other immigrants attracted to Georgia for the benefits the state offers, this number is only going to increase. So we're asking, we're echoing the need for language access provisions and cultural sensitivity trainings to be built into the bill, and asking that you consider that in the next round of amendments. Thank you.
I joked about the fact that sometimes I have trouble with English. I can't imagine moving to a foreign country and not speaking the language and trying to survive. As poorly as I do with English, I do even worse with foreign languages. And I can't imagine walking in that situation and adapting, and especially if I was having a mental health crisis. I think that was the last person. We did have people maybe in room 515. Have I missed anybody that would like to speak that didn't get to sign up? Okay, I don't see anybody. So I will turn it back over to our authors. If y'all would like to make comments after or anything about the bill, and then I'll give, if there's a little bit of time left, I will give the members of the committee if they have a pressing question to ask you.
Madam Chair, I'm just grateful for this time. It's a good amount of time, and the quality of interaction that we're having is just excellent. I look forward to working with many of you and many of the folks that came today to finalizing some of the more difficult areas, the registry, database issues, the protection of privacy issues, coordination on some co-responder issues and AOT issues. This is a very good beginning, and I'm very grateful, and I hope that we can move the bill on to Rules Committee, your leadership next week sometime.
Thank you, Chairman Oliver, Chairman Cooper, committee. Thank you so much. I want to reiterate what Chairman Oliver said and also note it's almost good to see trend lines happening from the testimony. We did hear some common themes. So I think that's somewhere where we're going to be able to focus on over the next week. And I think that really gives us, I think, a clear focus in terms of what really needs versus wants to be changed. And I think that's important. Last but not least, Chairman Oliver and I, we were remiss in recognizing someone at the beginning, and we apologize for that. Betsy Howerton, Legislative Counsel. She has been awesome. Yeah. Everyone does not even want to know how she's had to juggle all of this. And again, thank you so much.
All right. Representative Hutchinson has a question.
Thank you, Mrs. Chair. I wanted, for people who don't know me, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I founded an agency. Next month will be 20 years in business. We are an outpatient facility that provides mental health services in the community. I really wanted to be on this commission, but I was told as a freshman from the minority party I couldn't. So I just had to get that off my chest. My biggest concern, and has been since I got here, was duplication in administration, or not even duplication in addition to a bloated bureaucracy at DBHDD. Just to give you an example, just the most basic way I can explain it, if you have a provider, and I'm speaking for every provider in the state, if you have a provider that provides therapy services, you have one provider that provides therapy services. if you want to be in business, you have to have a contract with DBHDD, all the CMOs, private insurances, the DFACS, DJJ, anybody who could possibly send you a mental health referral. That's the only way we stay in business. However, if you have contracts with all of that, every single one of them audits us, every single one. We also have to have certification, CARF certification. They audit us every 3 years. Very, very expensive, tedious process. We're doing one service. This is just if we did one service. I believe if we can streamline that so that one entity is doing all the regulation of this one service, I feel like that is a lot of money we can put back into DBHDD for services. But I've been working with the budget office and research office. They cannot figure out how much money we spend in administration. I've been working with them for 4 years. They can't find a dollar number on what we're spending on administration. My worry is, this is a great bill. I love it. It's a great, great bill. My worry, though, is that we're putting a lot on top of a system that's not completely functional right now. And it's almost as if we're putting all this into a blank slate, but it's not a blank slate. So we're adding to an existing system, new databases, new complaint processes, behavioral health workforce database, assistant outpatient treatment advisory council, new advisory committee to evaluate CMOs, new task force to keep people out of jail, mental health court and correction subcommittee, clearinghouse for behavior health research and best practice, a network of local corresponder teams, a new annual reports for DBHDD, and a behavioral health coordinating council, just to name a few. So my concern is that we're putting a great, great package on top of something that could wipe out all of the advances we're trying to make here. So what are we doing? I saw that there was a task force that's going to evaluate this. But if this goes into place before we fix what's there, I'm afraid that this is going to backfire. That is my worry. Don't know how to fix that. I've suggested that I've dropped legislation so that only one entity can audit our current providers. If you've ever been through a Medicaid provider, and I know providers here, if you've ever been, I was 250 pounds before I became a Medicaid provider. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. I lost 20 pounds with every audit. They are so hard. They are so hard. And you can read, they're all online. It's all online. It is the most difficult process. I don't understand why we need the other 12 audits in a year, but I really am worried that we are overwhelming a system that's already tinkering on the brink of destruction. So how are we going to address this?
I just think that there's several things I totally agree with you about. And as you and I discussed Andy Welch did a I loved Andy Welch. I'm sorry he's gone. He did a deep dive on this in a study committee and really worked like crazy on the multiple different requests. Providers are an essential part of this system of delivery.
Yeah, and we're losing them.
We're going to have to pay them some more. We're going to have to not only cancel their loans, we're going to have to pay them some more, and we're going to have to streamline the bureaucracy. I don't think you've said anything that we aren't painfully aware of.
Yeah. And I think that Voices, one of their suggestions was what I just discussed. And I'm not even, no one here can say I've ever advocated for providers to get more money. That's probably, it's an ethical thing. I can't do that. I really do think if we can give providers breaks on having 99 audits a year, that would be so helpful. And we wouldn't even have to discuss right now a raise in provider rates.
Well, Representative, I had hair 8 years ago. And then I learned about all the back office issues that the government has. So you and I could open up a pretty cool office, huh?
Yes, I
The
think so.
Medicaid lose weight
Yes.
and the, oh my God, I can't believe how inefficient government is.
Yes.
So it all, what you're talking about, there's a serious matter, and I apologize. I'm not trying to be
No,
joking, but
We need
look,
some
I
humor in
learned
it.
there were 160 back offices as appropriations chair of education. All school districts have their own back office. If
Mhm.
someone could possibly explain to me why that occurs, you'll be the first one to be able to give me that logic.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think we have two challenges, which is I appreciate your compliments about the Parity Act. At the same time, trying to recreate or effectively get efficiencies within the back offices of all the departments, that might be a different lift in terms of not being put into this bill, but put into another bill. But I would support that and be any signer you'd like me to be on that bill.
Well, I wonder if we can incorporate something about who audits our providers right now. I believe right now, the way it's set up, we have private providers doing this. So it's in their best interest to find fault with the providers and to get, so not only are we not paying them enough, with every audit we get, most of the time they want us to write a check back to them. So if we could incorporate something about having a state entity, not a private entity, regulating our, or at least centralize it in an entity that doesn't have a financial gain in the process. Okay.
Wait, we're finished. Just a minute. I want to speak to you. Yes, ma'am. Right. I'm trying to get a ticket, just so you know.
You'll have to pay for that, Madam Chair.
Okay, no. I want to tell you that we passed out of this house an advanced, and somebody reminded me of this. It's my bill and I forgot it. We have an advanced psychiatric directive moving through the legislature, which would allow your son, when he's not in crisis, or a person not in crisis, to fill out a form that would tell, if you wanted to put how you've been treated or how you'd like to be treated. But the main part is you could designate another person to be, that would allow doctors and other people to talk to them about your health care and the medicines you're on and everything when you're in crisis, which hopefully would help you and your son if he would do that when he's not in crisis, and allow you to talk to the police and all about what's going on with him, if that would help a little bit. And it is moving through the legislature.
And if I may, since I'm here, I'm one of 9 kids, and there's a lot of mental illness in my family. My sister, Annie, died in a nursing facility. She choked to death on food because a care worker didn't go to her. There are some dreadful things that are happening in the name of mental illness, and you all deserve an applause, a clap on the back, a big hug, everything there is to be given. And there's no thank you. Sometimes I was a teacher, so there's not always a thank you for y'all. And I know that, but what you're doing is so significant. And I want to say that in terms of some of the things that I had in my notes, and I didn't want to elaborate, but having a future. People with mental illness don't think they have a future. All they see is the fear and the stigma. And those who are around it feel the same way, starting with the police. So I just want to say that he didn't get his meds. I had to learn that. And they didn't have to give him his meds. That's a crime.
Thank you. And I hope you don't get a ticket. I thought you'd gone. I'm sorry, Shelley, because I thought she had gone, and I would hope that maybe an advanced directive would help people. And I needed to ask Representative Oliver, would that help with the police if people had the advanced directive? That's what I thought, that it would help in being them to allow to communicate with the person that the person in crisis had designated. Thank you. I want to make sure that that did. And Shelley, I apologize.
Not a problem. Not a problem. I'm just saying that I think something to address the administration, or even if we can get one state entity to handle all of the audits, or if we can get all of the entities that audit or administer or has any hand in mental health funds to tell us in a dollar amount how much you're spending on regulating mental health funds, I think we will see we have a ton of money available to us that we can reinvest into mental health and hopefully bring down some of the administration and free up some of our mental health. Because I think some people think that mental health providers get a check from the state and then we have to budget that. We're fee for service providers. So if I charge you $100 for therapy, I have to pay a therapist, pay a biller, pay administration, insurance, rent, and all of that out of the services that we bill the state. We don't get a check. So to add all of these audits and certifications, and that is what's killing our providers. And that's what's preventing. I have more than one friend who moved out of Georgia to South Carolina because the regulation is not as strict or burdensome as it is in Georgia. I think we can keep more providers, get more providers, and put more money back into mental health services if we can do this. So I would really like to put that in here somewhere.
Okay, Shelley, what is your bill number? Oh, gosh.
I do not memorize bill numbers, but I
Okay,
can tell you.
well, I mean, could I ask the authors for us to look at that? I mean, we hear this from the medical community also that, if they're for every different CMO, they have to go through another certifying process. It takes forever and they have certain numbers they have to use to turn stuff in. I mean, if there was anything we could do to maybe help this situation in a small way in the bill, I don't know, but if we could just look at it, I mean, what harm would it do to add another 3 or 4 pages? I mean, at this point, it's like,
I will tell you,
go for it. At least it's not going to be 2,000 pages.
Please send us the bill number. I remember the first audit that I had, the service I was billing, the code was H0031, U3 for my license, U6 for either outpatient or inpatient. I had a U6 instead of a U7. A U7 pays out more. I put U6, which really hurt me, but I had to pay the whole thing back because that one digit was off. And that is every audit we do, and it's multiple every year. So to me, this is a huge issue that we can.
Well, I mean, it would seem like with the workforce, if we're so far off that certainly, I guess, could make somebody who's coming in and going to work in the state think twice if there's other places to work with less problems and less regulation. So I will just ask y'all, I know you've done all this work to look at it. Do we have any other questions from the committee members at this time? Well, first of all, let me reiterate what Representative Oliver said. Thank you to everybody that's come. Thank you for sending in your input. The more eyes at this that we've had, the better I think the bill will be in the end. Thank you to the presenters for all your work. And thank you to my committee members who have come and have listened so carefully. Please read the bill, the sub really carefully. And thank you again to Betsy, the best person from Legislative Council in the General Assembly. We are adjourned.
Okay, thank you.